Wednesday, September 8th, 2021, Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Today we're going to look at the slogan, which still applies today in spades. It's no taxation without representation. Before we go into the subject, though, I'd like to recommend a great video about what's going on, not only in the US, but Western Europe, the UK, as it relates to the supply chain and the trucking industry. In the UK, of course, trucking are lorries, or they call them HGVs. It's a great interview that Dunnigan Kaiser's done with a trucking industry insider. I remember listening to this guy almost 2 years ago in the beginning of 2019, and he's been spot on. So if you really want to know what's going on, listen to this interview. I highly recommend it. I'm going to put a link to it below in the description. I'm going to put it up in the cards. I'd like to thank again all my viewers, all my subscribers for their support through Patreon, through PayPal, through their comments in the comment section. It's really great. It really helps. It keeps the channel going, and I get a lot of my ideas from you. So if you want to keep supporting the channel, or if you want to support the channel, you can find out about how you can do that in the description box of all my videos. So let's look at that term. No taxation without representation. Where is that from? I know a lot of you know, but many people don't know their history, and they'll be asking questions. So the phrase taxation without representation describes a populace that is required to pay taxes to a government authority without having any say in that government's policies. The term has its origin in the slogan of the American colonials against their British rulers. Taxation without representation is tyranny. So that was the slogan of the British Americans, and nothing's changed because the British government is at it again. Well, you might say people voted for this government that we have. Well, but they promised not to raise taxes, especially the national insurance tax, which Boris Johnson has done. Shouldn't we be able to get our money back, so to speak, when we buy something and it doesn't do what the package says? We can take it back if it's broken with the receipt and get our money back. So yes, they're at it again. And it's unfortunate because the general public has been convinced that taxation is necessary, that we have to have government looking after us, that government knows how to spend our money better. And that's a real shame. So what am I talking about for those of you who are not in the UK? Well, the Boris Johnson government, the Tory government, has come out with a very controversial tax increase. So that there's a story inside the cabinet meeting that crushed Tory tax rise rebellion. Frontbench challenge to the national insurance increase dissolves with barely a whimper after threat of reshuffle sends rebels scurrying. So what's a reshuffle? Well, Boris Johnson threatened the people in his cabinet with the sack. He was going to sack them and replace them with other people if they didn't vote for this tax increase. Just like they're trying to coerce us into following draconian rules for something that I'm not going to talk about it. We know something that is not that fatal. So it's the same thing within government, within Parliament. The FT, what does the FT say? Johnson planned to fund health and care, lifts UK tax burden to 7-year high. Yeah, I've spoken about this recently, about government spending as a percentage of GDP. So the more government spends in tax, the less free we are. And as you can see here, I guess the UK doesn't have a very good track record going back even like to the 1850s. But compared to today, 2020, as you can see there, government spending is more than 50% of GDP. And I think that's going to go up even more. But prior to the 1920s, prior to the end of World War I, that number was usually below 10%, which is still high, because if you look at the United States, government spending, federal government spending, was less than 3% up until 1920. So that was a much freer economy. Is it any wonder that the US economy surpassed the British economy by 1870 with that kind of non-interference, by government being there just to administer the rule of law? And we're going to come to what the law really should be in a minute. We're going to reference the law by Frederic Bastiat. So I said earlier that the bankers are in charge, and they are, because this fiat currency system that we have, it's dependent on government debt, and the government debt, of course, has been really mushrooming, because they've been spending and borrowing to keep things going. And I have to say, the general public, they fall for it. They need to understand that we need to look after our own lives. But right now, everything has been so socialized in this country. And it's ironic that it happened after World War II, a war that was supposed to defeat socialism. Yeah, don't forget, the guy in Germany was a National Socialist. But then I think even in the US, to some extent, after the victory, they thought to themselves, we've done a really good job in managing the economy to win this major war. Why not take that strategy to the private economy? And I think that was a big mistake. So unfortunately, we're too far gone into where people expect something from the government. And the thing is, it's the bankers, the people who control the central banks, that lend to the government out of thin air, of course, but they want something valuable in return. So they need to make sure that people pay taxes, because people have to go to work to produce something of value, and they're forced to use this fiat currency to pay tax. Does it work all the time? No. The flip side is that it will hurt the private economy. It will hurt productivity and lead to even lower taxes. It will lead to stagflation, which we're already seeing. But you can see here, there's one rule, of course, for us, the general public. But for the City of London, there's just exemptions, right? I think this was earlier this summer when the G7 met for this global minimum tax. And you can see here, this is from the 30th of June this year. City of London set for exemption from new global tax rules. The City of London is set to win an exemption from new global proposals for taxing multinational companies, in a boon for the square mile's largest banks. So they could have financed this program that they wanted to finance, this social care program, if they had imposed this new global tax rule on the City of London. But the City of London, of course, the bankers are in charge. Does this mean that normal people that work in the city, and by normal people I mean the rank and file, they're going to get hurt as well? The people who benefit are the people right at the top, the Rothschilds, and other very important families who own the Bank of England, who control the major banks. They've got everything offshore as well. So the national insurance rise for them is going to be like a peanut. It's going to be nothing. It's like a grain of salt for them. But for the general public, it's going to hurt. So I want to reference then the law by Frederic Bastiat, and I think this is the route that we need to go down. Of course, I'm just one person here with a relatively big YouTube channel, but I don't reach many people. But if you could share this and talk to people about it, we could get some network effect. So I'm going to go to the chapter where Frederic Bastiat talks about the law. And he says, life is a gift from God. We hold from God the gift which includes all others. This gift is life, physical, intellectual, and moral life. But life cannot maintain itself alone. The Creator of life has entrusted us the responsibility of preserving, developing, and perfecting it. In order that we may accomplish this, He has provided us with a collection of marvelous faculties. And He has put us in the midst of a variety of natural resources. By the application of our faculties to these natural resources, we convert them into products and use them. This process is necessary in order that life may run its appointed course. Life, faculties, production, in other words, individuality, liberty, property. This is man, and by man, of course, he means humankind, not just men, but men and women. And in spite of the cunning of artful political leaders, these three gifts from God precede all human legislation and are superior to it. So these gifts, of course, are individuality, liberty, and property. Life, liberty, and property do not exist because men have made laws. On the contrary, it was the fact that life, liberty, and property existed beforehand that caused men to make laws in the first place. What is law? What then is law? It is the collective organization of the individual right to lawful defense. Each of us has a natural right from God to defend his person, liberty, and his property. These are the three basic requirements of life, and the preservation of any one of them is completely dependent upon the preservation of the other two. For what are our faculties but the extension of our individuality? And what is property but an extension of our faculties? If every person has the right to defend, even by force, his person, his liberty, and his property, then it follows that a group of men have the right to organize and support a common force to protect these constantly. Thus, the principle of collective right, its reason for existing, its lawfulness, is based on individual rights. And the common force that protects this collective right cannot logically have any other purpose or any other mission than that for which it acts as a substitute. Thus, since an individual cannot lawfully use force against the person, liberty, or property of another individual, then the common force for the same reason cannot lawfully be used to destroy the person, liberty, or property of individuals or groups. Such a perversion of force would be in both cases contrary to our premise. Force has been given to us to defend our own individual rights. Who will dare to say that force has been given to us to destroy the equal rights of our brothers? Since no individual acting separately can lawfully use force to destroy the rights of others, Does it not logically follow that the same principle also applies to the common force that is nothing more than the organized combination of the individual forces? So here's talking about government and the rule of law. They're supposed to administer the common rule of law that should not trample on our individual rights. But of course, it's not surprising that this is happening here in the UK. The taxation without representation, they're already trampling on our rights massively. And so what happens when you lose individuality, life, and property? Well, I think you become a slave. So when they talk about China or Russia being authoritarian governments, that they're not democracies, well, I don't know much about how people live in those countries, but I don't think it can be too much worse than it is here. So will the British fight again against taxation without representation like the British did in the colonies? Well, we'll have to wait and see. Even in the colonies, nowadays, the concept of the individual liberty and property, that's been trampled upon. There's one thing, though, that could scupper the elite, the people who really run governments, because it's not run by the people, and that is the collapse of their currency. That's the only hope I have. Apart from that, as individuals and families, the only thing we can do is to be aware that we're not really free and that we fight as much as possible to maintain maybe a little bit of freedom through being self-reliant, not being dependent on the bankers, and that means not being in debt to them. So with that, let's look at where the markets are this morning. It's 8:45 a.m. London time. Yes, Billy is moving around. Why is that? Well, because it feels like summer, and of course, technically we're still in summer, but it feels like June and July when it gets really hot here. So Billy's probably a little bit, uncomfortable, so he's moving around. So spot gold is at 1,800 actually. It's up about $6. Low has been 1794, high 1801.60. Silver is up 8 cents at 24.39. High's been 24.42, low 24.25. Yes, it does get frustrating and tiring seeing gold being manipulated, the gold price. But yes, this is all part of the individuality of the life and property. Do you really want to finance the people who are trying to trample on those three principles? No, I don't. I will give them as little credit as possible. And what do I mean by that? Well, any currency that you keep in their banks, that's a credit to them. That's right. You lending it to them. So, but if you hold real money outside their system, they can't finance themselves. Anyway, the Dow future is down 150 points, or just under 0.5%. NASDAQ future is down 53. The S&P 500 future is down 16 points. The FTSE is down 61. To the currencies, sterling is down about 0.1% at 137.74. The euro is unchanged, 118.40. The dollar is unchanged versus the yen at 110.20. And the dollar is down slightly versus the yuan at 645.94. The Aussie dollar is down 0.25% at 73.70. The dollar is up 0.2 versus the Canadian dollar at 126.70. And the Kiwi dollar is unchanged at 70.94. WTI crude is up 0.4% at 68.50. High grade copper is down 0.5% at 425. Natural gas is up 1% at 463. And to finish off, the 10-year yield is down 2 basis points at 1.35%. We saw the 10-year yield yesterday move up about 5 or 6 basis points. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button. Please share it far and wide. Think about subscribing to my channel if you haven't yet. And you can also follow me on Rumble, Twitter, Facebook, and all these other platforms below here. I wish you all a great day. Take care. Bye.